Dad gave my sister the house because sons don't need help. After my father's death, I learned he secretly transferred the family home to my sister years ago. I had paid the mortgage for a decade. When she tried to evict me, I uncovered documents he never thought I'd find. I didn't fight her emotionally. I fought legally. When my sister taped that eviction notice to the front door, I realized I had never really known my own father. It was early morning. The sun was barely up, the kind of pale winter light that makes everything look tired. I had just come back from my usual walk around the block, same route I'd taken for years, same cracked sidewalk in front of Mrs. Donnelly's house, same smell of someone's burnt toast drifting through the cold air. And there it was, a white envelope, crooked against the old oak door I'd painted with my dad 15 years ago. The tape was cheap, the kind that curls at the edges, my name written across the front in my sister's tight, careful handwriting. I didn't open it right away, I just stood there. Because that house, it wasn't just a house. It was where my mother used to hum while she cooked, where my father and I replaced the roof one sweltering July, both of us sunburned and stubborn, where I had spent the last 10 years paying the mortgage after Dad's health started failing. It was home, and somehow I already knew that whatever was inside that envelope was going to take it away from me. Before everything fell apart, our life had been quiet, ordinary, predictable. I moved back into the house when I was 34 after my divorce, not because I had nowhere else to go, but because Dad needed help. His arthritis was getting worse, and the stairs were becoming a battle. My sister, Lena, lived 2 states away. She called every Sunday, sent birthday cards, and came down for holidays when she could. She always said she wished she could do more. I didn't resent her for that. I worked as an electrician, steady hours, steady pay. When Dad admitted he was struggling with the mortgage after Mom passed, I didn't hesitate. I started covering it. At first, it was temporary. Then it became routine. 10 years of automatic transfers. 10 years of telling him, "Don't worry about it. I've got it." He would nod, that stiff pride in his jaw softening just a little. "You're a good son, Daniel," he'd say. We weren't a family that said "I love you" out loud very often. We showed it in repairs and paid bills and quiet cups of coffee at 6 a.m. When Lena visited, she would stand in the kitchen, running her fingers along the old countertops. "This place hasn't changed at all," she'd say with a small smile. Dad always looked at her differently, gentler, like she was still the little girl with pigtails who scraped her knees in the driveway. Sometimes, late at night, I'd catch him staring at old photo albums. "Your sister's always been more sensitive," he once told me. "The world's harder on girls." I didn't think much of it then. After all, I was the son, the strong one, the one who could handle things. That's what he'd always believed. The first crack appeared about 3 months after Dad's funeral. Grief has a strange smell, like dust and old paper, and something metallic underneath. The house felt heavier without him. The clock in the hallway ticked louder than before. Lena stayed for a week after the funeral. She cried openly, her shoulders shaking. I didn't. I handled paperwork, canceled utilities in his name, met with the bank, made lists. One evening as we sat at the kitchen table surrounded by documents, she cleared her throat. "Dad talked to you about the house, right?" she asked carefully. I looked up from the insurance forms. "Not really. It's still under his name. I'll sort it out with the estate." Her eyes flickered, just for a second. "Oh," she said, "I thought maybe he'd mentioned something." "Like what?" She forced a smile. "Nothing. Just forget it." I should have pressed her, but I didn't. I assumed we were on the same page, that the house would be split evenly, or maybe I'd buy her share since I'd been paying for it. It seemed logical, fair. Life moved on in small, quiet ways. Lena went back home. I stayed. I kept paying the mortgage just like before. No one from the bank said anything unusual. No letters, no warnings. Until that morning with the envelope. My hands felt strangely steady as I peeled it open. Inside was a formal notice, 30 days to vacate the property, my name, the address, and beneath it the legal owner listed as Lena Morales. I read it 3 times before my brain accepted the words. Legal owner, not co-owner, not beneficiary, owner. I laughed once, a short, hollow sound that echoed off the porch.
There had to be a mistake. I stepped inside, the house suddenly unfamiliar. The smell of Dad's aftershave still lingered faintly in the hallway closet. I dialed her number. She picked up on the third ring. "Hey, Danny," she said softly. My throat tightened. "Why is there an eviction notice on my door?" Silence, then a quiet exhale. "He transferred the house to me 3 years ago. It's in my name." The kitchen clock ticked loudly behind me. "What do you mean he transferred it?" He said sons don't need help the way daughters do, that you'd be fine, that I might not." Her voice trembled, but there was something else there too, something rehearsed. "I've been paying the mortgage for 10 years, Lena." "I know. Did you?" Another pause. "Yes." That was the moment something cold settled inside me. Not rage, not even betrayal, just clarity. Dad hadn't trusted me with the truth, and my sister had known. "I'm not leaving," I said quietly. She didn't argue. "You have 30 days. The line went dead. I stood there in the kitchen, the same kitchen where we'd celebrated birthdays and argued about politics and eaten burnt Thanksgiving turkey one year, and I realized this wasn't going to be a family conversation. This was going to be a legal one, and I wasn't going to fight her with tears. I was going to fight her with paper.
I didn't sleep that night. The house sounded different when you realize it might not be yours anymore. Every creak in the floorboards felt like a countdown. The refrigerator hummed like it was reminding me of something unfinished. I sat at the kitchen table with the eviction notice in front of me and my old bank statement spread out like a second layer of skin. 10 years, 123 mortgage payments, all from my account. I ran my thumb over the wood grain of the table Dad and I had sanded together. He'd insisted on doing it by hand instead of renting a machine. "You feel the work more this way," he'd said. I wondered now what he'd felt when he signed that transfer. The next morning, I called the bank. After 15 minutes of elevator music and polite apologies, a woman with a steady, professional voice confirmed it. "Yes, Mr. Morales, the property deed was transferred to Miss Lena Morales 3 years ago. The mortgage remained active and has been paid consistently." "Paid by me," I said. There was a pause on the other end. "I can't comment on internal arrangements," she replied gently, "but yes, the payments are listed under your account." Internal arrangements, that's what they called it. I hung up and stared at the wall where Dad's framed military photo still hung. He looked younger there, certain, like a man who believed in fairness. But maybe fairness had never been his measure. That afternoon, I drove to Lena's place. 3 hours on the highway. The sky was flat and gray, the kind that presses down on you. I didn't call ahead. I didn't rehearse what I was going to say. When she opened the door, she looked smaller than I remembered. "Danny," she said, stepping back to let me in. Her house smelled like vanilla candles and fresh laundry. A different life, a different world. We sat across from each other at her dining table. She kept twisting a ring around her finger, a nervous habit from childhood. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. She swallowed. "Dad didn't want me to." "That's not what I asked." She looked at me then, really looked. "He said you'd be angry, that you'd think I manipulated him." "Did you?" Her face flushed. "No, I didn't. He brought it up. He said sons don't need help, that you're strong, that you'd always land on your feet." "And daughters don't?" I asked quietly. Her eyes filled, but she didn't cry. "I went through a divorce, Danny. You know that. I was drowning. Dad thought this was his way of protecting me. By keeping it a secret?" She hesitated. "I didn't want to hurt you. I let that sit between us. You've been cashing my mortgage payments for 3 years on a house you legally owned." "I didn't touch the money," she replied quickly. "It was still going to the bank. But you knew the equity was building under your name." Silence. There it was, the part she couldn't argue with. "She needs the house," she said finally. "I'm selling it. I can't afford to keep it otherwise." Something inside me steadied. So this isn't about protection. It's about profit. That's not fair. "No," I agreed. "It's not." I stood up then, not in anger, just in finality. "I've got 10 years of proof that I paid for it. Every wire transfer, every receipt, every tax statement." Her expression shifted, not fear exactly, but calculation. "What are you saying?"
I'm saying I'm not moving out, and if you want me to, you're going to have to explain to a judge why I was paying your mortgage. Her lips parted slightly. You'd sue me? I'd ask for what's mine. The drive home felt different, lighter almost, not because I felt victorious, but because the fog had cleared. This wasn't about being the overlooked son anymore. It was about accountability. That week, I met with a lawyer. Mr. Patel was in his late 50s, glasses balanced low on his nose, office smelling faintly of coffee and old paper. He listened without interrupting as I laid everything out. When he finished, he leaned back in his chair. You may not own the deed, he said slowly, but you likely have a claim under unjust enrichment, possibly constructive trust. Legal terms, solid, measurable. He continued, she benefited from your payments, especially if she knew about the transfer and allowed you to keep paying. She knew. He nodded once. This won't be quick, and it won't be cheap. I've already paid for the house once. I can pay for the fight. Filing the claim felt surreal. Lena called the next day. I got served, she said, her voice tight. I know. You're really doing this. Yes. You're making this public. The family will find out. They should. Another long silence. I never wanted it to be like this. Neither did I. When I hung up, I didn't feel triumph. I felt grief, not just for my father, but for the version of us that might never exist again. Still, every morning I woke up in that house, made coffee in Dad's old chipped mug, watered Mom's dying fern, and waited. Because this wasn't going to explode in shouting matches. It was going to unfold slowly, in courtrooms and affidavits and quiet, uncomfortable truths. And I was ready.
The first court date felt less like a battle and more like a reckoning. The courthouse smelled like polished floors and old anxiety. People sat on wooden benches, clutching folders the way I had once held my father's hand in hospital waiting rooms. Tight, desperate, silent. Lena arrived 10 minutes after I did. She wore a navy blazer, her hair was pulled back neatly, like she was going to a job interview instead of facing her brother in front of a judge. She didn't look at me at first. When she finally did, her eyes softened for just a second. Danny, she said quietly. Lena. We stood 3 feet apart. The distance felt like miles. Her attorney was younger than mine, sharp suit, sharp jawline, carrying a thin leather briefcase like he already knew how this would end. Mr. Patel gave me a small nod. Stay calm, he murmured. Facts. That's all that matters. Facts. I repeated that in my head like a prayer. Inside the courtroom, everything was smaller than I expected. No dramatic speeches, no raised voices. Just a judge flipping through paperwork while the ceiling fan hummed overhead. Lena's attorney spoke first. The deed transfer was legal, Your Honor, executed voluntarily by the father while mentally competent. My client is the sole legal owner. Sole legal owner. The phrase landed like a quiet slap. Mr. Patel stood. We are not disputing the legality of the transfer, he said calmly. We are disputing the financial contributions made by my client over a 10-year period, 3 of which occurred after the transfer, without his knowledge. The defendant accepted the benefit of those payments. The judge looked at Lena. Were you aware your brother was making mortgage payments after the deed transfer? Her throat moved when she swallowed. Yes. Did you inform him that the property was in your name? No. The silence that followed wasn't loud, but it was heavy. The judge adjusted his glasses. Then we will proceed to examine whether a constructive trust or reimbursement is appropriate. There it was. Not drama, not vengeance, just accountability. Over the next few weeks, documents became weapons. I gathered every bank statement from the last decade, highlighted transfers, printed emails where Dad had thanked me for helping with the house, found tax records listing me as the one claiming mortgage interest for years. One evening, while digging through Dad's old filing cabinet in the hallway closet, I found something unexpected, a manila envelope labeled simply House. Inside were copies of the deed transfer paperwork and a letter, not addressed to me, not addressed to Lena, just written in Dad's shaky handwriting. If anything happens to me, I hope this keeps Lena safe. Daniel is strong. He won't need this the way she might. I sat on the hallway floor reading it twice. There was no apology, no explanation, just certainty. He hadn't meant to hurt me. He believed something about sons and daughters that he never questioned. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the envelope. It didn't change the case, but it changed something in me. I realized this wasn't only Lena's choice. It was a pattern handed down to her, protection disguised as preference. The second hearing was more detailed. Numbers filled the air instead of emotions. My payments totaled nearly $186,000 over 10 years. 3 years of payments made after the transfer amounted to $57,000, money that directly increased the equity under Lena's name. Her attorney argued that I had lived in the house rent-free. Mr. Patel countered with market comparisons showing that even if rent were considered, the payments exceeded reasonable occupancy costs. I watched Lena while they spoke. She didn't look angry. She looked tired. At one point, our eyes met. "I never thought it would go this far," she whispered during a recess. "It didn't have to," I replied. She shook her head slightly. "You could have just moved on." "From what?" I asked gently. "From 10 years of my life?" She didn't answer, and I realized something else in that moment. She hadn't expected resistance. Dad had always framed me as the strong one, the stable one, the one who would be fine. Maybe she believed that too. Maybe she thought I would step aside quietly because that's what strong sons do. Word began to spread through the family. My Aunt Rosa called first. "Is it true you're suing your sister?" she asked, her voice a mixture of concern and gossip. "I'm asking for reimbursement," I corrected. "But the house was Dad's wish." "Dad's wish didn't include me paying for it after he signed it away." There was a long pause. "I didn't know that," she admitted. Neither had anyone. On Sunday dinner at my cousin's place, conversations stopped when I walked into the room. Forks paused mid-air. Eyes avoided mine. Then Lena arrived 20 minutes later. For a second, I saw it on their faces. Confusion. 2 siblings, 1 house, 2 truths colliding. My Uncle Miguel finally cleared his throat. "Why didn't anyone know the house was transferred?" he asked Lena directly. She hesitated. "Dad wanted it private." "And Danny?" he pressed. "Did you think he deserved to know?" Her silence said more than any argument. That night, as I drove home alone, I didn't feel victorious. I felt exposed. Family isn't supposed to be divided by court filings and spreadsheets, but sometimes silence does more damage than lawsuits. A month later, the judge issued a preliminary decision. He acknowledged the deed transfer as valid, but he also recognized my financial contribution and Lena's knowledge of it. The final ruling would determine compensation, possibly forcing the sale of the house to reimburse me fairly. When I stepped outside the courthouse, Lena followed. "So that's it?" she asked quietly. "No," I said. "It's just the part where the truth gets measured." Her eyes glistened, but she held herself steady. "You really believe Dad was wrong?" I looked at her carefully before answering. "I think he loved us both," I said, "but love doesn't cancel out fairness." The wind moved gently between us. For the first time since the eviction notice, I saw not an opponent, but my sister, conflicted, raised on the same lessons, benefiting from the same imbalance, and now forced to confront it. The fight wasn't over yet, but the ground had shifted, not because I yelled, not because I threatened, but because I refused to disappear quietly. The final hearing was scheduled for a Thursday morning in early spring. By then, the maple tree in the front yard had started to bud, tiny green leaves pushing through bark that had survived storms I barely remembered. I stood at the living room window before leaving for court, staring at that tree, wondering how something could stay rooted in the same place for decades, while the people inside it changed so completely. The courtroom felt less intimidating this time, less like a battlefield, more like a place where scales were quietly balanced. The judge reviewed the financial summaries one last time. Mr. Patel had prepared everything meticulously. Spreadsheets, timelines, documented transfers, clean. undeniable. Lena's attorney shifted strategies. My client acknowledges her brother's contributions, he said. However, Mr. Morales benefited from exclusive occupancy of the property for years. The word exclusive stung, as if I had claimed something selfishly. Mr. Patel stood calmly. My client maintained the property, paid utilities, taxes, and mortgage installments. The defendant, fully aware of the transfer, allowed him to continue under the belief that he was preserving a shared family asset. That knowledge is critical. The judge leaned back, fingers steepled. He didn't look at either of us when he spoke. Intent does not erase impact, he said slowly. The court recognizes the deed transfer as lawful. However, equity demands remedy. My chest tightened. The judge ordered that if Lena chose to keep the house, she would be required to reimburse me the full amount of post-transfer mortgage payments, adjusted for market rental value and improvements, a substantial sum. Alternatively, the house would be sold and I would receive a proportional share, reflecting my documented financial contribution over 10 years. It wasn't everything, but it wasn't nothing. It was acknowledgement. Lena's face went pale. Outside the courthouse, the air smelled like rain. The sky hung low and heavy, threatening but undecided. She stood beside me on the steps, arms folded tightly across her chest. "I can't afford to buy you out," she said. I nodded once. "Then the house gets sold." Her jaw tightened. "You're really okay with that? Selling it?" I looked at the building behind us, then at her. "I already lost it once," I said quietly. "At least this way, it's honest." She closed her eyes briefly, as if absorbing something painful. "You could have just let it go," she whispered again. "And you could have told me the truth 3 years ago." The rain started then. Light at first, then steady. We didn't move. For the first time since all of this began, there was no legal language between us. No attorneys, no formalities. Just 2 siblings standing in the rain, realizing that our father's decision had carved something permanent between us. The house went on the market 6 weeks later. I handled the listing photos. It felt strange, staging rooms that still held echoes of our childhood. I boxed up Dad's old tools, packed away Mom's recipe books, wrapped dishes in newspaper with quiet care. The real estate agent walked through with bright energy. "She's charming. Solid bones." Solid bones. I almost laughed. If walls could talk, this one would have needed therapy. When the "for sale" sign went up in the yard, neighbors slowed their cars to look. Mrs. Donnelly from across the street came over that afternoon. "I heard about everything," she said gently, pressing a warm banana bread into my hands. "I'm sorry." "For what?" I asked. "For families being complicated." I smiled faintly. They always have been. Word had fully spread by then. Extended relatives stopped treating it like gossip and started treating it like a cautionary tale. At a cousin's birthday party, my uncle pulled me aside. "You did the right thing," he said quietly. "Standing up doesn't mean you stopped loving her." That sentence stayed with me, because that's the part people misunderstand. I never wanted to hurt Lena. I wanted the truth to weigh what it should. The house went on the market faster than I expected. A young couple with a baby on the way. They walked through the front door holding hands and smiling at the sunlight in the kitchen. I watched them from the hallway as they whispered about paint colors and nursery ideas. For a moment, I saw us, decades ago, 2 kids running through the same rooms. A father believing he was protecting one child without realizing what it cost the other. Closing day felt quiet. Paperwork signed, funds transferred, my portion wired into my account, not as a victory, but as resolution. Lena didn't look at me much during the signing, but when we stepped outside for the last time, she lingered on the porch. "Dad thought he was doing the right thing," she said softly. "I know. He always said you were strong." "I was, but that doesn't mean I didn't deserve fairness." She nodded slowly. "I should have told you." "Yes," I said. The wind moved through the maple tree above us. "I don't know how to fix this," she admitted. I looked at the house one last time. "Maybe we stop pretending it didn't happen. That's a start." She gave a small, fragile smile. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, but something honest. We walked away in opposite directions. Not enemies, just changed. The day I handed over the keys, the house felt lighter. Empty houses have a different kind of silence, not the heavy kind I felt after Dad died. This silence was clean, Final. The floors echoed when I walked across them. The air smelled faintly of dust and lemon cleaner. I stood in the kitchen for a long time. The table was gone, the chairs were gone, even the small dent in the wall where Lena once threw a rubber ball too hard. It had been patched and painted over. It looked like a house ready for someone else's story. I placed the keys on the counter and ran my hand over the surface one last time. "Take care of it," I whispered, though I wasn't sure whether I meant the house or myself. Outside, the young couple waited with hopeful smiles and nervous excitement. The woman was visibly pregnant, her hand resting instinctively on her belly. When I handed them the keys, the man shook my hand firmly. "We'll take good care of it," he said, and I believed him. I drove away without looking back, not because it didn't matter, but because it mattered enough to let go. I moved into a modest 2-bedroom apartment across town. Nothing fancy. White walls, thin carpet, a small balcony that overlooked a parking lot instead of a maple tree. The first night there, I sat on the floor with a takeout container and listened to unfamiliar sounds. Footsteps upstairs, a car alarm in the distance, someone laughing in another unit. It didn't feel like home, but it felt honest. The money from the sale sat quietly in my bank account. I paid off lingering debts, invested some, set aside enough for a down payment on something smaller someday, something that would be mine from the beginning. No secrets, no assumptions, just paperwork signed in the open. Lena and I didn't speak for a while after the sale. Weeks passed. Then one evening, my phone buzzed. A simple message. "Can we talk?" I stared at it for a long time before responding. "Okay." We met at a quiet cafe halfway between our towns, neutral ground. The place smelled like espresso and cinnamon. Soft jazz played in the background. She looked tired, but not defensive. "I've been in therapy," she said, after we ordered. That surprised me. I didn't expect everything to unravel like that. I didn't realize how much I'd convinced myself it was fine. I listened. She stirred her coffee slowly. "I think part of me believed what Dad said, that you didn't need help, that I did. I leaned into that story because it benefited me." Her honesty landed softly. "I leaned into it too," I admitted, being the strong one, the responsible one. It felt easier than asking questions. She nodded. "I'm sorry," she said. Not dramatic, not tearful, just sincere. "I know," I replied. "We didn't fix everything that afternoon. There was too much history for that. But we talked, really talked. About Dad, about Mom, about how differently they treated us sometimes without even realizing it. He loved you," she said. "I know he did, but love isn't the same as equality." She didn't argue. Before we left, she reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Thank you for not destroying me in court," she said quietly. I almost smiled. "I wasn't trying to win," I told her. "I was trying to be seen." That's the part that took me years to understand. This was never about the house alone. It was about feeling invisible in my own family story, about realizing that strength shouldn't mean silence. Months later, I bought a small townhouse on the edge of town. Brick exterior, narrow yard, no maple tree, but enough space for one. The day I signed the papers, I felt something steady settle inside me. Ownership, not just of property, of my voice. I planted a young maple sapling in the backyard that first weekend. The soil was cool and damp in my hands. As I pressed the dirt down around its roots, I thought about how trees grow straight when they get equal light from all sides. Too much shadow on one side and they lean. Families are like that too. If one child is always told they're strong enough to endure anything, and the other is told they must always be protected, something tilts, and eventually someone pays the price. I don't hate my father. I understand him more now than I did before. He grew up in a world where sons were expected to carry weight without complaint, where daughters were shielded. He thought he was being fair by his own logic. But fairness isn't about intention, it's about impact. Lena and I still speak. Not every day, not the way we did as kids, but when we do, there's something different there now. Less assumption, more honesty. We don't pretend it didn't happen. We acknowledge it, and somehow that's allowed something new to grow. Sometimes late at night I sit on my small back porch and listen to the wind moving through the leaves of that young maple tree. It's still thin, still fragile, but it's upright, and so am I. If you were in my place, would you have walked away quietly, or would you have fought to be seen, even if it meant meant tearing open old wounds. I never wanted revenge. I wanted recognition, and sometimes the most powerful thing a strong son can do is refuse to disappear. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt overlooked or told to endure silently, share your thoughts below. And remember, strength isn't about carrying everything alone. It's about knowing when to stand up. Thank you for listening.